Hello, this podcast is recorded on Gadigal country and we pay our respects to the First Nations custodians of the land, both here and also wherever you're listening from.
Hi.
Hello. I have had, like you, a very full summer of reading and watching telly, although probably more watching than reading stuff because there was quite a few books I started and abandoned, but I'll come to them later.
What is your, how far do you persist before you abandon?
One of them I did about a third, the other one I did about half. One of them you're going to be cross to know I abandoned. Good Material by Dolly Alderton.
I love that.
I know. I just found it a bit of a downer. It's a breakup book about a dude whose girlfriend's dumped him, and I just got kind of halfway into it. I really liked Dolly Alderton, but I just kind of felt like, yeah, I'm not finding this funny. I'm not finding it that entertaining. It's okay, but I just want to read other stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think, I mean, given that you've been through a divorce and I haven't, is it a bit like, ugh,
It was the dude.
Oh, it's the dude.
I felt, well,
as opposed to the divorce of yours, which is your fault.
I felt like the woman was entirely justified in dumping his ass, and he was just, I found, intensely irritating, and so I didn't want to immerse in his kind of world any longer. I was just done with him.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I actually found what I liked about it, I thought it was funny, but I also, the experience of hearing a male character self-examine, the reasons why his relationship might have fallen apart, but that it's written by a woman, I found really interesting. You just don't see it very often, and
Yeah, no, that didn't hold me. Well, actually, okay, so while I'm on the stuff I didn't like over summer, I might as well go to the others because
anyway,
they were all things
I really liked that book, so
They were all things I talked about that I was going to read. The Year of the Locust by Terry Hayes, which I'd been hanging out for because I loved I Am Pilgrim. I even reread I Am Pilgrim in the lead up to it. Oh,
I love how you prep for reading a new book.
I just couldn't get through it. It was just, I found it to be a bit of a hot mess, actually. So that was disappointing because that was top of my summer reading wish list, or not top actually, but up the top. The other one that was a bit of a letdown was I've been listening to a pod that I know you have as well called The Rest is Entertainment with Marina Hyde and Richard Osman. Yeah. That just gets better and better. They're delightful. They're finding their chemistry. Great. Really wonderful.
Do you know they've done a couple of cooperative things with the Dollop, which is a bit interesting?
Oh, have they? No.
We listened to an app they did the other day where talking about the death of George Washington, who I did not know. We went for a walk, got wet, then hosted a dinner party, got a bit of a chill, and then was seen to by a series of terrible underqualified doctors,
quacks.
Each of whom withdrew a pint of blood from him, and then one of them covered him in beetles, and then he died. Yeah. Probably because of the medical care that he got.
Terrible.
Which has really set the scene for the American healthcare system ever since.
So that podcast, I'm always jotting down stuff they're talking about because things sound great. They recommended a book called Erotic Vagrancy by Roger Lewis. Marina Hyde recommended it about Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Yep. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I felt like it assumed too much knowledge of their work. And because they're kind of pre our era, really, I don't know. I haven't watched all of their films. And so I felt kind of like someone was talking about something I didn't really get. And so I abandoned that as well.
So the title is about when they went to shoot Roman Holiday?
No, they didn't do Roman Holiday. It was whatever film it was in Italy. And the Pope, because they were so amorous, the Pope cracked it and put out a papal statement to say this erotic vagrancy had to stop.
They were shagging all over Italy, basically, and they were condemned for erotic vagrancy.
Yeah, it was a bit, it just didn't kind of hold my interest. But I'll tell you what did hold my interest, the final two books of the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard
What a
Osman.
surprise.
The Bullet That Missed and The Last Devil to Die. That series just got better and better. I absolutely adored it, and they were fantastic holiday reads. The second one, the second one that I read, which is the fourth one in the series, has the most incredibly moving discussion of dementia, which from a book one they've established Elizabeth's husband Stephen has dementia.
Oh, okay.
And then the way that the book ended, it ends with Joyce, who's one of the characters. She writes in a diary, and she's writing in a diary, and then the very last line of it was so touching, and I was so. It just felt like, how am I going to deal without these people in my life anymore? I literally just burst out crying. Like, not even like a bit teary. I literally went, and just burst out crying on the spot. It was just, I loved them so much.
You are so funny the way you really do join the family when you're like
I do.
enjoying
I get attached. So
how were you with like Puff the Magic Dragon as a kid?
No.
I mean, I could never
not
listen
into
to
that
that
stuff. No.
No, but just the loss of, or the Velveteen Rabbit, anything about,
No, I didn't, none of those. I used to, Black Beauty I remember feeling pretty sad at the end of. When Matthew died in Anne of Green Gables, I was bereft.
What, he dies? I haven't finished it yet.
And there was a TV show called The Littlest Hobo. Did you get that in Adelaide? Yep. And so every
Did we
time
get that in Adelaide?
I used to think, the dog... can't you just stay with this nice family? Why have you got to hit the road again, buddy?
Mate, he's always travelling.
Speaking of dogs, actually, that's a good segue, and it wasn't planned. Another book I read, Muster Dogs From Pups to Pros by my old mate Lisa Millar.
Far out, that show.
Now, that TV show is very, very popular on the ABC, and Lisa has written a companion book. If you love that TV show, you're just going to adore this book. It's so Lisa. It's so warm and friendly, and it's all the backstories of how dogs are trained, people who live in the country. If you like Muster Dogs, if you like regional Australia, if you like Lisa Millar, it's just completely up your alley.
It is such gorgeous television, and I think, you tune in for the pups, but what you actually are getting is the life stories of these fascinating people.
Yeah.
And, as a country person, but it's just not that often, aside from back roads and stuff, that you see people who are massively charismatic and interesting, but you wouldn't necessarily ever see them on TV.
Fantastic. And with incredible skill sets, And so the book goes through, so people from season 1 and season 2, you get more backstories of the people who've participated in it. So that's great. While I'm talking about books written by a colleague, just another one to give a plug to, Richard Glover's got a new book out called Best Wishes, Making the World a Better, Less Annoying Place, One Wish at a Time. I've just absolutely adored that read.
I've always, when he writes, he's such a funny writer.
He's so funny. He is so hilarious. And so many of the things that he wishes for, I go, yes, exactly. And Richard also, so I do a weekly slot on radio every week with Richard, and I find it really, really fun, and we really make each other laugh, and we give good banter. And he writes exactly in his voice, in his own voice. And so you feel like, I know this is such a kind of sad thought, but I was thinking, whenever Richard pops his clogs, I'm always going to have Richard's.
You're killing him off now.
I'm always going to have Richard's company.
He's very healthy and not very old. Oh my.
Also, he listens to this pod, so he's going to hear that and go, "Oh, thank you, Sales."
I think you've got to bump him at least 10 up your friendship ladder. He's currently sitting at
he
a
thinks
nervous
he's at about 132.
Yeah, I reckon you've got to crack the ton with that guy. Given that you've just announced how much you'll miss him when he dies, and he's in rude good health.
If we could be precise, what I actually announced is that I won't miss him when he dies, because his books are so clearly written in his voice that I'll always have his company. He'll be immortal. Richard Glover's going to be immortal.
2 things about Richard Glover. One is very tough childhood and had some really genuinely traumatic, shocking things happen to him when he was a teenager, and which he writes about in various of his books with a great honesty and straightforwardness, and including sexual assault, which dude of his age is a hard thing to talk about. Just talks about it so well, but somehow views the world with love despite all of this stuff.
He is the sunniest, most pleasant person to hang around with. And so even though this book, I guess, is a series of complaints about the world and how it can be improved, they're just so massively entertaining and fun. And he's just got the lightest touch. Yeah.
And when you listen to him on radio, and he's been doing that afternoon shift for, I don't know how many years, a long
25,
time.
25, I think.
And the thing about him that makes him magical is you can hear the joy in his voice when he gets, what must be the 300th phone call he's ever had from a person telling him about, this was my favourite school teacher, or this happened to me when I was a kid, or do you remember, XYZ snack from the 80s or whatever. And he's just so into listening to other people's stories.
Yeah,
that it's infectious.
I think he's an inherently very decent person, and that his decency comes through. Richard Glover's on Sydney radio, so apologies to everyone who doesn't live in Sydney, but he is lovely. And if you want to get what we're talking about, if you read any of his books, they're just such delightful reads. So I thoroughly enjoyed that too.
Well, that's enough to... I mean, now you've essentially delivered Richard's eulogy. You won't have to go to his funeral. So there's like time saved.
Sorted, absolutely.
We'll just bookmark this, play it, at whatever state funeral he receives.
He, like me, likes to prepare for things. And so he'll always email me on the day, Tuesdays when I go on, and he'll say, here's what I think we could talk about. Anyway, one day when we used to do it on a Monday, I set up a challenge, and I said it's no prep Monday. And so we said, all right, the challenge is, because I think that kind of like me and you, Richard and I can just talk endlessly, like we just keep finding things to talk about. So I said, all right, let's put our money where our mouth is and actually just no prep Monday. Anyway, as soon as I walked in, Richard was like, I thought I might ask about it. I'm like, no, Richard, no, that's prepping. So we did it. We talked for like half an hour without drawing breath.
Pair of nerds.
Now I wanted to raise, it's not really a book, but I did want to raise this. While we were on a break over summer, Bill Granger died, the Sydney food legend. And I just wanted to pay tribute to him, because I think nobody has taught me more about how to cook from scratch than Bill Granger and Stephanie Alexander through their cookbooks. And Bill Granger, when I first moved to Sydney, Bill's was, had started, and, the scrambled eggs and the avocado on toast and all of that. People would go to Darlinghurst to get that. But his first book that I had, which I think was his first book, was called Sydney Food.
Yes.
And, I cooked something out of Sydney Food yesterday, actually, a buttermilk cake. Everything in Sydney Food is so easy. It's the sunniest book. The photographs are gorgeous. The recipes always work. None of them involve difficult ingredients. They are just tried and tested and uniformly delicious. And he made cooking accessible. It didn't feel too difficult, but you could cook from Bill Granger's books and deliver delicious food. And so then that was the gateway into more complicated cooking. And Stephanie Alexander as well, with The Cook's Companion, where everything's broken down. How do you boil a potato? Like, everything's broken down. Everything that you make, if you follow the recipes in that book, turns out really well. And I felt so sad when Bill Granger died, because I just thought, my goodness, like I never met the man, but geez, he gave me a lot.
That is a really great series of things to say. I will add one thing, which is he also, I think he was one of the early proponents of the big table where everybody, you can end up sitting next to people. And I reckon for Sydney, which is like a lot of the world's big cities, a place where you can get pretty lonely, like the capacity to break down barriers between people and end up sitting next to someone that you actually get along with. Look, I know your face is just going, I would hate that. But for us, Mrs. Have a Chat ladies, we find great people just by accidentally sitting next to them. And, I like that.
He also, I think, around the world, like for Aussie expats, because Bill's opened up in various places around the world, that was a taste of home, basically, that you go to. So, yeah, and he was very young. I was very, very sad to hear that. So I just wanted to mention what a huge, someone that I never met, but I just feel like, wow, you did a lot for me, Bill Granger. Thank you very much.
Well said, man. And the secret of perfect scrambled eggs, of course, is just more saturated fats.
Absolutely, cream. Whack in a bit of cream. I'm reading at the moment. I haven't quite finished it yet. This is the only highbrow reading, really, that I've done all holidays. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction last year, Trust, by, I think it's pronounced Hernán Diaz.
Yes, and I have got that and haven't read it yet. So what do you say?
It's very clever, and it's definitely holding my interest. So it's set in an era that lends...
lukewarm, mate. I mean,
No, it's set in an era that is a kind of fascinating era that lots of books have been written in, which is the kind of capitalist golden age of New York. So kind of 20s, 30s sort of, banking in New York. And it starts out, the first part of the book is a novel called Bonds, which has been written about a supposedly fictional couple. The dude is a, sort of almost like idiot savant genius at predicting the market and where it's going, and he's got a wife, and the wife becomes unwell, and she goes into a sanatorium in Europe to try to help with her issues, and she ends up dying. That's basically, I'm not giving anything away, that's the gist of the novel. Then the next part of the book moves into a real life person who is furious about this novel that has been written about his life that some writer claims is fiction, but it's actually him.
Right.
And it's his diary of his account of what actually kind of occurred. And then it shifts perspective again, and it's written by this woman called Ida Partenza, and she's a woman who went to work for this man whose name's Andrew Bevel. And this is now her take on what she believes happened with the Bevels. So it's pretty much the same story, but told from multiple perspectives. And so I guess it's a meditation on the idea of like unreliable narrators, right? And what's true and what's not true, hence why it's called Trust. Trust, I'm assuming, is also a play on money kind of stuff. Anyway, it's
well spotted.
It's very
with your finance expertise.
It's very creative and very interesting and well written, and I am and original, and I'm finding it very good.
All right. Well, you have been busy and concise. Are you winding yourself up? Am I missing something?
Look, I just wanted to get the highbrow content out of the way before I can shift straight to the lowbrow. Okay, I watched a lot more TV than I read over summer, I've got to admit. My favourite thing that I watched was Welcome to Wrexham, which is on Disney+.
Okay, yep.
Absolutely adored it. It's the Thursday Murder Club television equivalent in that feel good sense where you love the company of these people. They have done the most marvelous job of this show. It's basically two Hollywood stars, Ryan Reynolds and the guy who gets in a derogatory sense referred to constantly as the other guy. His name's Rob McElhenney. McElhenney, can't even remember his name. They buy a football club in Wales, in a town called Wrexham. And Wrexham has been down on its luck for a long time. It's a working class coal town, and their football team has been in the bottom tier of the Football League for ever and ever and ever. And these two guys believe that the town's got some potential, the football club's got a lot more potential, and we're going to inject some money and some energy into it and see if we can lift Wrexham into the next league.
So what is their connection to this joint?
They just buy it. They buy the football club.
But they're not from there.
They're the owners. No, it's a bit like kind of a Ted Lasso style, but a real life Ted Lasso style thing. So they're not from it. They don't have any connection. Rob clearly is more obsessed about sport and football. He's a massive Philadelphia Eagles
that would
fan,
help you,
so he also
imagine.
follows football in the US. But he needs movie star money, as he puts it. So he calls his mate Ryan Reynolds and fleeces him for cash to help them buy this club. And then over the course of 2 seasons, it follows not just actually very little is to do with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. You see a bit of the behind the scenes of them trying to make it work financially, but mostly it profiles players, families, fans, people who work in the club, people who've lived in the town for a long time. Right. And every episode it'll explore a different facet of the town, and then you've got the thread, of course, of how's the football team going over the 2 seasons. Oh, it's just absolutely addictive and delightful. It's very, very well done, huge amount of heart, and just fantastic. And it just makes you... I haven't yet done this, but I want to watch Deadpool now because I never have seen a single thing with Ryan Reynolds in it.
And so is there much Ryan Reynolds in the film? I mean, presumably he's off making big budget movies to actually finance.
I think if you're someone who works in television like us, you know how to cheat when you don't have a lot of availability with someone to make it look like you've got a reasonable amount of availability.
Put a different shirt on, Ryan.
Yeah, exactly.
We're filming next week.
There's clearly interviews that are done with Rob and Ryan that are done in the United States.
Right.
They do, of course, become more and more addicted to the team, and so they're flying over, coming to big games and things like that. So they are there quite a lot. They're pretty invested in it.
And is there any division in the community about these two assholes just turning
Initially,
up
there's a bit of like suspicion because the town feels like, oh, we've been let down before. People have said they'd look after the team and then they don't, and and you're outsiders and all the rest of it. But because, you know, the stadium's falling apart, the team's been in the doldrums, the town very quickly is actually thrilled and very grateful that these guys have injected all this energy. And then when they turn out to be lovely guys who are actually very genuinely, their motivation is they want to lift up the town. You know, they're not trying to profit from the team. They're trying to lift up the town, get the team back on its feet, and then presumably they're going to sell the team probably for a mozza. But the town, they are just heroes. They eventually, you know, the town adores them. They are they can do no wrong. And there's a band that makes up a song about Wrexham that calls the Deadpool and and the other guy, and it's a lovely, lovely show.
So you've finished watching the series.
2 seasons.
It's over.
Yep. I have set up a Google alert for Wrexham and Paul Mullen, who's their top player.
Oh my God.
I think it's...
If you make me go there...
I want to go there.
I know you want to go there. It's just pulsing off you. It's impossible to miss. I'm not going there with you.
I will. At some point, you mark my words, chatters, I will be posting something on our social media of me in a Wrexham scarf at Wrexham football
tour
ground.
Of Cardiff,
I absolutely
beckons.
Okay, so that was my favourite. A quick shout out to 2 other things that I really loved. Sex Education Series 4. I've always loved that show. It's another season of just absolutely fantastic television, and I think that it is a show that does the most incredible modelling of self-acceptance, safe sex, consent, diversity, inclusion. Like, it's a fantastic show. Really,
Plus
really
Gillian,
great, mature show.
What's her face?
Yeah, Gillian Anderson, she's so great. Strife, which was on Binge.
I loved that, yeah.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that as well. It's loosely based on Mia Friedman's memoir. Asha Ketty plays this woman who is setting up, it's set about a decade ago, setting up a kind of publishing / online digital media company when everyone else is still in magazines and thinks it's a dumb idea. And she's really interested in it, and she is very driven and ambitious and extremely good at what she does. And she is, struggles to kind of balance her life with her ambition for her work. And Asha Ketty does the most fantastic job of capturing, all of that. It was great.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you've talked about, the sort of journo side of it and what she's trying to do professionally. I actually also loved the fact that it's also a lot about her home life.
Yeah.
And so the Asha Ketty, Mia kind of character is divorced and has 2 sort of annoyed with her kids that she's constantly embarrassing by, writing blog posts about things, a little bit too much information, etc. So it's a little bit about that, explosion of people writing opinion and columns that go viral and blah, blah, blah. And who plays her ex?
Matt Day. He's fantastic. Matt Day,
seriously.
He's just been good in every single thing he's ever done. He's just great.
Yeah. And I think, obviously, this is based a bit, on Mia Friedman's memoir, which I think has been republished along with the
although
series.
she's not divorced and she has 3 kids.
Exactly. So
it takes liberties.
Yeah, exactly. So there are definite plot differences, but the best thing as I was watching it, and I was at that point pre-Christmas trying to run around, organising things, failing. I mean, I've got presents that I still haven't sent out and watching that character just screw up again and again and again domestically was just so reassuring to me. I really enjoyed it. But then I also thought, Mia would have had to walk her husband through, look, people will think that this happened to us. But on the other hand, you are being played by a very hot and great actor. And that, I reckon, would be, a serious win.
The other thing that was great was I loved the dynamic, actually, between the Matt Day character and the Asha Ketty character, in that her name's Evelyn in the show, in that they're divorced, but they still get on pretty well. Yeah. And he understands her and understands that just because she's a bit shambolic and that she's kind of not going to be reliable to pick up the kids doesn't mean she doesn't love them. He gets it. He's still, even though they're split, he's kind of supportive of her.
Yeah, I like that too. I think it's one of the things about the series that I enjoyed the most is that it's really well written.
Yeah.
The dialogue is terrific, and you don't get that thing sometimes that you get where you can tell an actor's a bit embarrassed about having to say this line. You don't feel tense for the actors because they're a great cast and really good writing, well paced, and what you glimpse, as you say, from their relationship is the same thing that you see in any of your friends that have split and worked really hard at still retaining the parts about their friendship that made the relationship work for a long time. And I think it's almost like it's a bit educational in that sense.
They've done that well because obviously if there was no tension, then you wouldn't be split. So capturing on film, I think that balance between we can get on and we still respect and love each other to a degree, but you can really piss me off. Like that is a very good. They've captured that, I think, incredibly well.
Did I tell you? I mean, I'm pretty sure I talked to you about this because I watched like heaps of the seasons of it really fast. That series called Divorce with Sarah Jessica Parker.
Yeah, I watched that too. Yeah,
that captures. A lot of that sort of energy.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, the two other things that I watched that I'll quickly rattle through before we run out of time is Boy Swallows Universe.
Right, I was going to ask if you'd watched that because I haven't yet because I'm waiting for my teenager who was completely obsessed with the novel to be available to watch it with me. I want to watch it with them. So
my kids watched it with me. They're 12 and 10.
Oh,
they found it's a bit adult, but they really loved it.
Yeah.
There was one scene in particular that one of my kids found hard to take, but they absolutely loved it. They really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, they found it a very compelling story. They had lots of questions. They're desperate to meet Trent Dalton. They wanted to know, was Slim Halliday a real person, and all of the rest of it. So it is, if you liked Boy Swallows Universe, as did the hundreds of thousands of people who bought a copy of it, making it one of the most successful fiction books in Australian history, you will love this adaptation. It is an excellent adaptation of the book, and it's written by John Colley, who's a wonderful Australian screenwriter, and it's cast really well. Everyone in it is fantastic. Particular shout out to Simon Baker, who is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, I've heard a few people say that. Yeah.
He plays Eli's father. He strikes this beautiful balance between tragedy but also funny. He has some really great comic moments as well. But the standout star is the kid who plays Eli. His name's Felix Cameron. Oh, my God. He's heartbreaking. He's so good. My friend that I was watching it with, we were saying, because the character in the book cries all the time, this little boy. He's a crier. And so this kid has to cry a lot. You can feel that kid's distress when he cries. He's the most authentic little crier. And it's just, he embodies the character so well. He's just the most adorable child. I think he's a huge star. So yeah, I just loved him. And so yeah, that was really, really well done. And of course, growing up in Brisbane, it's very 80s nostalgic.
Yeah.
You know, anyone familiar with Brisbane will be like, oh God, like, you know.
And the time you spent in prison. Like,
absolutely, yeah. My parents being drug dealers, yeah.
Isn't it interesting, like, that's the most common, I mean, this thing's going crazy. Everybody around the world's watching it. But the most common feedback that I've heard is that the children, they got completely right.
Like, the children are wonderful.
And I guess with casting, it either you get someone miraculous or someone who kind of can do it.
It's almost miraculous. Yeah. Like, and the older brother too, Gus, like the chemistry with the two actors and how they do it, it's just fantastic. And with the mother, with Brian Brown, like it's very, very, very well done. So if you loved the book, don't be scared like, oh, they butchered it. No, they've done a very, very good job of it. The other thing that I watched, it's my second attempt to watch it, is Ozark. Now, I was thinking of it before when you were talking about women and aging and stuff like that. So Jason Bateman is the lead in this show. He plays Marty Bird, is the character's name. Jason Bateman, it must be a Bateman family thing because he looks quite a lot like his sister Justine Bateman. And Justine Bateman's been out talking quite a lot about the unfair beauty standards on people. And both Justine and Jason Bateman have a somewhat kind of craggy face. Like they're both very good looking, but they have a cragginess to their faces. That's obviously been massively problematic for Justine Bateman, but it's worked incredibly well for Jason Bateman. And so that kind of was something I was thinking about a bit watching it. Now, I've finished 2 seasons of it, but I'm not entirely sold that I'm going to watch on. So
the first season about it because I loved it.
Oh, did you? Did you watch the whole lot of it? I didn't know you'd watched it. Okay. We've probably talked about it before, but I've forgotten.
No, we haven't, I don't think.
Okay, I feel a bit like it's a poor man's Breaking Bad. So it's
harsh.
I think it's about a man who's desperate, who's kind of on the edge in this. And again, I'm not saying anything that's a spoiler. This is established in episode 1, that they're drug dealers. His whole family has been included. You know, Jason Bateman is Walter White. Julia Garner, who plays a character called Ruth, is basically Jesse Pinkman. Like, it's just the parallel. It's like they went, we need like another Breaking Bad to come along. So it feels quite derivative to me, but not as good as Breaking Bad. So Breaking Bad came out in 2008. This came out in 2017. I feel like I mean, maybe this comes after season 2, but I feel like I need more backstory. There's one episode I've seen where they give some backstory about Marty and Wendy and how they kind of got into this mess.
And Wendy is played by
Laura Linney, who's great.
Yep.
I feel like I don't really have a grip on Marty Bird and Wendy and why they went so deep into this so kind of seemingly easily. So that puzzles me a bit. I don't feel like I've got a good grip on Marty Bird. The person in this show who I think is absolutely brilliant is Julia Garner, who plays Ruth, she was in The Americans.
I would watch anything with her in it.
You cannot take your eyes off her. She just chews things up. Like, she is such a compelling presence on screen. She's absolutely extraordinary.
I've got something that you need to watch then, and I watched it just the other day. It's a movie called The Assistant.
Okay.
And it is such an unusual movie. It stars Julia Garner, and it was made, I think, around about the time of the Me Too and, you know, exactly what a monster Weinstein was, whatever. And she is on screen 90% of the time. She has got a low-level assistant job in the office of a movie mogul, and most of the film is basically a camera on her making phone calls, changing flights, taking enraged phone calls from the mogul's wife, working out what she can say to the wife about where the mogul is, and dealing with the other people around this mogul. And she is always in the office, and that is where almost all the film is shot. And you never see the mogul.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds great.
Hallucinogenic almost in its sort of
that sounds
quietness and the observation. And you get this sense of how unbelievably strange this whole organisation is, because you see all the other minions defaulting to each other, trying to think, you know, what this guy's going to want. You meet the driver who's been waiting there for hours and hours, doesn't know. Like, you meet like the guy who has to have the plane ready. Like, it's...
Oh, that sounds really good.
It's really great and interesting.
Now, something that I actually put into the Chat 10 Facebook group to get people's theories on was Marty Bird's phone rings like 15 million times every episode with, you know, the drug cartel or the Snells or whatever.
Yeah.
His ringtone is crickets. And this, because you hear it so often, it really stuck in my head, because I'm like, why would Marty Bird have crickets as his ringtone? Because he seems like such a kind of type A, straight-laced personality who's somehow accidentally found himself a drug dealer. I felt like he'd have like classic ringtone, like just phone ringing ringtone. Anyway, so I thought, but this has to be a deliberate choice, because you hear the phone ringtone so often. It can't be an accident that it was crickets in episode 1 and then they were just like, oh, well, I guess we're stuck with crickets. Anyway, I asked if other people had any thoughts about this, because I honestly couldn't come up with a single reason. And I just love the way people come up with stuff. So somebody said, my ringtone theory, the thing about Marty Bird and his type A style is this. I've noticed that people like this will sometimes deviate from their own norm and do something quirky, just one odd thing, probably to show that they're not so straight-laced. And screenwriters for a show like this will want to not stereotype a character. They'll want them to be multi-layered. And so I find this kind of quite believable. And then somebody else said, crickets is still a classic ringtone. If you look at your phone, it's in the classics list of ringtones, but it's not a ring. It's more understated and backgroundy, which suited him in my mind. And then another person said, my friend who's a photographer has this ringtone, and she says it's so if she's forgotten to turn it to silent, it's just crickets. Isn't that clever?
I didn't think about that once through series and series and series.
I apologise now to anyone if you're going to watch Ozark, because that's all you'll hear now is the crickets ringtone. I hear it all the time.
Remember in the early days when you could like first establish new ringtones, different.
Yeah.
And there was always some dickhead in the office who would have like some terrible like
Or
or a chumbawamba or some sort of like, and that was phased out because evolution. Those people would never survive. They would be beaten to death by their office mates sooner or later.
Now, before we go, we have got something coming up that I am so looking forward to, which is a series of shows with the Australian Chamber Orchestra in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, 8th, 9th and 12th of April. And it's basically us and them doing a show together. And it came about because we did something with Richard Tognetti and his wife Sati Vanska.
Yeah, we did something
in
with
our
them.
Sydney show.
Sat outside their house begging for this for months, and eventually they just wanted us to go away.
So if you are in Sydney and Brisbane, these are our only Sydney and Brisbane shows this year. So if you want to see us live, those are the shows to come to. So Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, if you look at our website or their website, all the details are there.
I've got the dates though, I wrote them down.
I said them before, 8th, 9th and 12th of April. It's going to be really, really fun.
Because it's basically the TikTok of how, you'll hear some incredible music played different ways with the musicians explaining how they do this and that, which old nerdy brain here is very excited about. But also, what are the politics inside an orchestra? This one doesn't have tuba players, so that'll be fine, but like...
Yep. There's also some hilarious stories from behind the scenes that I'll save till the actual show about my requests for certain things that I want.
Mariah Carey springs to mind.
I will save those tales for the show, and I'll see you here in a couple of weeks.
You sure will. By which stage I will have toweled myself down. It's actually a 35-degree day outside as well. So yeah, all right.
It's
anyway,
very warm.
Off you go then.
See you later.
Off you go. Thank you for enjoying both the oral and the visual experience of me talking to this lady here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for so much more content. It'll probably quell your enthusiasm, but give us a go or listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you ever think that we'd be telling people to subscribe to our content?
No, I did not.
We're cool at last.
Don't. You're making me look bad in front of my children. Again.